Today, there are roughly 370 million people who speak Arabic as their mother tongue, and that is less than 5% of the total world population today. So how is it possible that the Qur'an, which is only in Arabic, can be considered a miracle for those who can't speak Arabic? How is that fair, and why would they be convinced that this is indeed a miracle? Well, first of all, messengers are given miracles that challenge the thing that their people are excelling at, since they would be the ones to really understand and appreciate the miracle. So, Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, having been sent among the Arabs, who were distinguished by their great eloquence and beautiful style in speech, Allah made the miracle of the Prophet, peace be upon him, of the same nature by which his people were distinguished. Same thing can be said about Musa, peace be upon him, who was sent among those who were good at sorcery, and therefore his miracle was turning his staff into a snake, challenging them in their game. And Isa, peace be upon him, who was sent among those who were good at medicine, relative to their time, of course. So his miracle was curing people and bringing them back from the dead. So, the Qur'an being revealed in Arabic is the most logical thing it can be, since it was revealed among people who excelled at using Arabic and challenged them in it. But now is the question, how can we compare an observable miracle like that of Musa and Isa to a more abstract one like the Qur'an and its linguistic miracle? Well, let's take the miracle of Musa, peace be upon him, as our example here. All of Musa's miracles could be observed and seen by anyone, but they will not be fully understood and appreciated except by those who are well established in sorcery. Why? Because average people would see and still think that this is just a magic trick like any other, but sorcerers are the only ones who can fully realize the extent of the miracle. And that's why they were the first to believe that Musa, peace be upon him, was a real messenger from Allah. It would be then logical for the average person to think, if the sorcerers themselves couldn't stand up against Musa's miracle and they believed in him, it would then only make sense to believe that Musa is indeed a messenger, even if you don't know the exact details of what he had done, since the people of knowledge have already given him credit. And the same applies to the miracles of Isa, peace be upon him, and doctors at his time. So just like the miracles of Musa and Isa are primarily directed towards the people who have knowledge in that field, the Qur'an is also challenging those who are most knowledgeable, most eloquent at Arabic. So naturally, not any average Arab or anyone who doesn't know Arabic. It would then make sense if you see that the most competent fail to rise to the challenge for centuries, that you would start thinking that this is not a normal feat. It is like you have invited 100 of the strongest bodybuilders in the world and asked them to try and lift a mystery box. All 100 of them tried and failed to lift that box. They then tried to lift it all together, and they still failed. And so they all said, it is too heavy to even move, let alone to lift it up. Would you then think that this box is light or heavy? The logical thing here is that you wouldn't need to lift and carry the box yourself to believe that it is indeed too heavy, because those who have a better chance at it tried and failed. You can still go training and become the strongest man in the world, but it wouldn't change the fact. So the miracle challenges those who possess the knowledge, and then it is up to the average person to follow logic or not. And so, if the Qur'an challenged the most eloquent generation of Arabs who have existed, and not only them, but all humans and jinn to come up with a surah like the Qur'an, and after all these centuries, there is indeed none, then you don't have to be the most eloquent speaker to understand that this is indeed a miracle, and believing in it is really the only logical action to do. You can certainly learn Arabic and become eloquent, but that won't change the fact, since those who were better than anyone today at Arabic tried and failed. And now you might be thinking, well, I'm not about to blindly follow something because others have failed. And while this might not be the most logical stance, the Qur'an still provides an answer for this type of people. The Qur'an being the most unique, most powerful miracle there is, and actually the one that still exists today, it even has miracles within that anyone can understand and appreciate, even if you have zero knowledge of Arabic. And with any degree of logic, you can conclude that the Qur'an is indeed a divine book. So just to name a few, the historical miracles of the Qur'an, which are historical facts that were mentioned in the Qur'an, but not in any other book before it, which of course were later proven to be accurate pieces of information. The numerous scientific miracles of the Qur'an, which are scientific facts proven to be correct centuries afterwards. Added to that, the prophecies that the Qur'an made for events which hadn't happened yet, but later they all came to pass. And the fact that this book is the only book there is, after all this time, was not shown to contain a single mistake in it. And there are so many other aspects that don't require that you are eloquent at Arabic or that you speak Arabic at all. It is enough to realize them by reading an honest translation of the Qur'an in your own language. And the only logical action would then be to believe in this miracle, simply because it is the Book of Allah. Thanks for watching. If you want to start reading and understanding the Qur'an in Arabic, then you should start your journey right here. And don't forget to check out my latest book, which goes perfectly with this free course. I'll leave the links for all of them in the description, so check them out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
وإذ قرأتم في الكتاب أن الشمس تغرب في عين حمئة وكنتم تجهلون إنما الأرض تجري حول شمسها ولكن لا تشعرون. These
were two verses from the chapter of Creation, or Surat Al-Khalq, which was written by someone who apparently accepted the challenge of the Qur'an to produce a surah like it. And apparently he did. So, does that now mean that the Qur'an is not miraculous anymore? Well, certainly not. Far from it, actually. This is nothing but some nonsense. But wait a minute. How did we come to this conclusion? And why did we dismiss it like that? Isn't the challenge is to produce something like the Qur'an or even one surah? Why isn't this considered to be up to the challenge? Well, while these lines do look like the Qur'an, and they might also sound like it, but you needn't look further than the meaning of whatever this is, which is silly and laughable to say the least, with complete lack of balagha or any aspects of beauty to know that this is a making of a human being, and not a very bright one at that. And just a simple look at any ayah from the Qur'an, you will see the beauty of expression, the unparalleled eloquence and incredible precise choice of words, and unmatched balagha. But while all of this is true, if we are being fair, the beauty of the text remains a subjective criterion. I mean, someone could look at the same ayah and claim, well, I don't really find it to be beautiful, or actually find the meaning of this to be more beautiful or as beautiful. Or even with a little bit of tweaking, this thing would also carry some beautiful aspects of balagha as well, which makes it then at least as good as the Qur'an. Well, you get the idea. Therefore, it is important to understand that the linguistic miracle of the Qur'an runs far, far deeper than just the beauty of its words and the accuracy of its expression. There are objective criteria that make even producing one short surah to be absolutely impossible. Let's first start with a simple example, just to point out the premise before we explain it. And the purpose of this example is not to compare, just to illustrate the idea. William Shakespeare said, "To be or not to be? That is the question. He also said, all that glitters is not gold. If I then come and say, to eat or not to eat, that is the question. And then I said, all that glitters is not diamond. It could be glass. Does that now make me as good as Shakespeare as a playwright? It would be silly to think so. Just because I took this eloquent quote from Shakespeare and then changed some words around a little bit and then added some stuff here and there doesn't mean that now I made a quote that is as good. It only makes me look stupid. But what was originally unique and noteworthy about the work of Shakespeare at the time is that he thought of a unique way to deliver a certain message. Simple words full of meaning. That's why some of the quotes are still alive today. So, to be as good, I need to think of a unique quote that is influential enough to be remembered years from today. Not just to imitate some of what he said and play with words around a little bit and then claim victory. That is just a very shallow way of thinking. But now is the question, what is then so linguistically miraculous about the Qur'an that truly made it a miracle that can never be imitated or even come close to it? In other words, what are the limits of eloquence in a text that separates a very beautiful text that is made by humans from miraculous divine text from Allah? We'll investigate only 3 of more than 50 miraculous aspects of the Book of Allah that we know of, which make the book unmatchable. First, the Qur'an, a new system. Before the Qur'an was revealed, Arabs had poetry and prose. There was no other form of literature. But when the Qur'an was revealed, there was poetry, prose, and the Qur'an. In fact, the Qur'an was so revolutionary and groundbreaking as literature that it didn't belong to either poetry or prose. It was a whole new system that even had its own jargon, which are unique words that specially belong to the Qur'an. The word Qur'an itself, the word surah, ayah, tilawa or tala, and all this kind of words that uniquely belong to the Qur'an. Interestingly, none of these words was promptly defined at the beginning of the book, as you would expect from a new book, to tell us what Qur'an is and what is an ayah, a surah. But for some reason, that was never needed in the case of the Qur'an. Arabs just understood what each of these words meant, and it fit perfectly in what the Qur'an was all about. So, the first question for those who want to take up the challenge of the Qur'an: can you come up with a piece of work that is so significant and unique in itself that it would create a 4th branch here of literature? Can you do that? Second, a new branch of knowledge. The Qur'an came with a brand new branch of knowledge, tajweed. Tajweed is the way we should read the Qur'an. It is true that some aspects of tajweed were indeed part of how Arabs talked, like heavy, light letters, qalqala, iqlab. But Arabs didn't elongate words, which is using med. They didn't extend the ghunnah of noon in certain situations. They didn't apply ikhfa as we would do when reading the Qur'an. These are just some of the unique features of the Qur'an that are applied on the Qur'an when read. And these rules have been passed down from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, till this very day. So the second question now is, that surah you're thinking about making to look like the Qur'an, remember to also devise a new system with which you can read your surah, and it has to be a unique branch of knowledge. What comes next is even more miraculous. Third, novelty. The Qur'an was revealed in Arabic. So what can be new about it then? Well, this can be investigated in 3 categories. First, the Qur'an used words that Arabs knew and recognized, but they were used in new ways. And there was also completely new Arabic words that were derived from Arabic roots. And then there was also new expressions, or as we also say, language chunks. So these 3 types of new words, let's look at them one by one and understand what they mean. The first type, words like sultan, marad, yanzurun, aslama, تولى, قم, الأجر, الإحسان, القيامة, النار, and hundreds of other words. Arabs knew all of these words, but in the Qur'an, they were used in such a way that gave them a new dimension and a new meaning. But the most surprising part in all of that is that when they were used like that, Arabs were able to understand exactly what they meant. Take the word marad as an example. Arabs knew what this word meant, sickness, but when it was used as في قلوبهم مرض, it was easy for them to realize that this was not a real sickness, a physical one. Sickness of the heart is doubt and affectation. And yet, when it was used in this context, it made perfect sense, and they directly understood what exactly it meant, without having to explain it or define what it means. Another example is the word qum, means to stand up. But when it was used in Surah Al-Muddathir, qum fa'anzir, it was used with the meaning of to commence. But because of the way it was used in the ayah, it didn't need any explanation or introduction. Another example is the word sultan, which was known to Arabs as sultan or ruler. But its metaphorical use in the Qur'an gave it a new meaning, which is authority. And so many other examples that actually impacted how Arabs viewed these words. And we're not talking about just one or two words. We're talking about hundreds of words, which weren't only new and original in their use, but they were clear and unambiguous. And achieving this not just once, but many, many times, even within the same surah. This is truly miraculous. What about the second type? New words that were derived from Arabic roots. While these words did come from Arabic roots, the form of such words was still new to Arabs. But just like the previous type, these words didn't need any exposition or explanation. So for example, Arabs knew yura'i, but they didn't know ri'a. They knew ittaqa, but not at-taqwa. Ash-shukr was known to them, but not ash-shukur. They knew al-alam, but they never thought of using it in plural, al-alamin. So while anyone can come up with new words, the true miracle here is combining novelty and unambiguity. And not just once, but throughout the entire book. And readers were still able to understand the perfectly conveyed message. And if you're finding it difficult to understand how can something so new be so clear, that is exactly why it is called a miracle, and one of many reasons why it can't be replicated. But to really understand the scale of such miracle and challenge, the first full surah to be revealed was Al-Muddathir, which is made up of 256 words. This surah alone contains at least 84 new words. They are Arabic words, but Arabs either didn't use them in the same way or they were original words derived from Arabic roots. 84 words is about 1/3 of the 2-page surah. However, Arabs had no problem understanding what the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, recited to them, and could only say that this was nothing but magic. The Qur'an didn't only come with new words, but also new ways to say things and express them. And again, clarity perfectly combined with originality. Take, for example, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Arabs knew both words, but using them in this way, in this combination, that was never done before. Maliki Yawmiddin. The word Malik is owner, and Yawm means day. Arabs never used this combination in this way. How can you own a day, a piece of time? And yet, in its context, it made perfect sense what this was referring to. And every single surah contains a combination of all of these. Yet, the result is clear, concise, and beautiful, all at the same time. And in case you're wondering how we were able to conclude which words and expressions were used by Arabs before the Qur'an and which were not, these conclusions were drawn based on comparisons with Arabic poetry, prose, and the speeches that they produced before Qur'an revelation. And so we could conclude which words, expressions, and phrases were used and how they were used before the revelation of the Qur'an. And I think now we are starting to understand more how it was possible for someone like Umar ibn al-Khattab, for example, like so many others of the Sahaba, may Allah be pleased with all of them, became Muslim just by listening to a couple of ayat, and that's it. It was incredibly clear to them when they first heard it that this cannot be the doing of humans. This must be from a higher power. It also explains to us how some scholars try to explain al-huruf al-muqatta'a at the beginning of surahs. Think of it like that. You were invited by someone for dinner, and you were presented with a meal that was so delicious that you almost lost your mind. And so you asked the host about the ingredients, to which he just simply answered, well, the ingredients are water, flour, and yeast. That's it. And this answer itself makes you even more unable to understand how he could put this meal together in such a way with such simple ingredients. As many scholars explained, al-huruf al-muqatta'a are a direct challenge to the disbelievers by just showing the basic and the simple components of the words of Allah. And yet, they cannot come up with anything that matches this miraculous book. So unless you are able to match these standards and actually many more, you shouldn't even think about challenging the word of Allah. And if you want to learn to understand the Qur'an in Arabic and really appreciate its miracle, then you can start right here. And don't forget to check my latest book, which goes perfectly with this course. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.